If you want to catch more walleyes on the opener this upcoming weekend, stay tuned because we have a bunch of tips from a bunch of different people. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Will Poppenfuss. He's got the first set of tips.
Hey guys, Will Poppenfuss with Northland Fishing Tackle. It's just before the Minnesota fishing opener. I'm just in the garage getting a few things ready to go. I'm just going to give you kind of a quick rundown of what my go-tos are going to be here for opener. It's going to be pretty simple. It's going to be a jig and minnow probably most of the time. If they're biting pretty good, I might mix in, maybe I'll throw a smelt nade around with some eye candy, probably throw either a paddle shad or the minnow and work those around. But most of the time, I'm probably just going to be ripping a jig and a shiner. I'm going to mix it up between probably 1/8 ounce tungsten jig most of the time. I might throw some deep feeds just because if I fish some rock piles and stuff like that, those deep feeds seem to work through the rocks a little bit better. So it's going to be kind of a mix between tungsten jig and maybe a smelt nader and eye candy and a deep bead jig all tied up. I might have a couple slip bobbers tied up just in case they're not eating the jig, but they should be. It is opener, so they should be chewing pretty good. We've had a little bit earlier ice off this year, so the fish have settled down enough, they spawn, they're ready to chew. So it should be good. Water temps are anywhere from that 47 to about 52 range mostly everywhere else, so we'll just kind of see how it goes. I'm probably gonna start around those sand flat areas, anywhere from probably, let's say 5 to, probably shallow as 5, but as deep as 10 to 12. Just kind of depends where they're at. Side imaging is definitely your number one friend this time of year. Shallow sand, those fish show up really good on side imaging, and they're kind of spooky up shallow. Easy to find fish up there, up in flats, weed edges, stuff like that, edge of the rock piles. And my biggest tip I would say is just kind of get away from people. Fish get kind of spooky this time of year just because they are shallow. And a lot of boat pressure and people driving over kind of scare them. So don't get caught up crowd hopping, kind of get away, find your own fish. And a lot of times you find fish away from the crowd, they're gonna be a lot hungrier because they aren't spooked and they're ready to go. So good luck to everybody out there this opener. Looks like some good weather coming in. I know everybody's been chomping at the bit with the early spring to get out, so seems to be a good opener. So good luck on the water, guys. Have fun, be safe, good luck.
Next up, Dusty Minky is going to be breaking down how exactly he's going to be targeting walleyes on Leech Lake this weekend.
Hey, Dusty here. It's the 2024 fishing opener, and I'm up here in Walker, Minnesota, going to be fishing Leech Lake. Things are looking really good. The ice has been off for weeks now. Water temps are in the mid 50s. I've been out there chasing crappies, and the crappies are shallow, finding the warm water. I've also been out on the road. Bait shops are full of bait. With the ice going off a little earlier than normal, I think the bait situation is going to be a lot better. So is the bite because the water's warming up. Everything's looking great. I just wanted to share a few tips and tricks. I'm in the garage here ditching the rain and rigging a few rods. I like this part of it too. So I'll show you my main weapon for this Saturday. Probably no secret, year after year, this is the Northland stand-up jig. It's 1/8 ounce. I love putting a spot-tailed shiner on there. I use 6 or 8 pound mono. I just like the float the mono gives. I really like to snap that jig and shiner, and it just gives a good fall. And a lot of times that walleye's gonna pin that shiner to the bottom, and you'll lift up, and they're gonna be there. So give that a try. There's some other good colors, but I like to kind of match the hatch, and that silver one there seems to look just like that shiner. So give that a try. Also this year I'm excited with the warmer water temps. I think I'm going to get a little more action on one of my favorite rigs, and that's no surprise either, is I'm a big fan of the bobber, and I'm going to go sharpshoot them on my Lowrance active target, and I'm going to be using this black tungsten. That's a 1/16 ounce. It's real nice and small. The fish have a hard time seeing that. So that's going to be in my arsenal. I might even try a night crawler on there, and a lot of times too this time of year you can get away with maybe back hooking or tail hooking a shiner on there. So give that a try. And if the fish are really active, and something I really like to do all the time, and I had good luck last year when the water warmed up, is I'm a big fan of this mimic minnow jig that Northland makes. It's got a really sharp Gamakatsu hook, and this is the new eye candy paddle tail. If I can get them to bite on that rig, this is hands down my favorite rig. You don't have to mess around with bait, but sometimes this time of year, those walleyes, they just prefer that live bait, and your rod should probably be looking like this with all those shiner scales. That's a good sign that that you're doing and using the right stuff. So everybody have a safe and fun opening weekend. Good luck.
Next on the docket is Tom Wynn, experienced tournament pro, and he's going to be sharing a few presentation tips that'll help you catch more walleyes this weekend.
Fishing season is finally here, and so it's time, I guess, for me to show. I'm supposed to show you guys what I'm going to be using. But no, of course, I'm going to have my tungsten jigs in my hand on my every single setup during opener, and I'm going to pair it with a live minnow or a 3-inch eye candy plastic that resembles either, this is a 3-inch grub in fathead pattern, and this is the eye candy 3-inch minnow in smelt pattern, which also resembles a shiner. Now, going back to tungsten. Tungsten to me is the key to all of my success and is the most key component in this rod reel line setup. Super sensitive rod, braid, fluorocarbon, then this at the very end. When that fish noses up to the bait after, you know, they're lethargic from after the spawn, they're going to nose up to the bait, they're going to suck it in. When they suck this in, they flare those gills, I can feel this tungsten hitting the roof of their mouth. And guess what? If this tungsten is hitting the roof of their mouth, guess where the point of that mustad hook is when you set the hook? It's buried through the bone. So keep that in mind. Keep your setup sensitive, finesse, early part of the year. After about 2 weeks of that, you can start popping that jig and getting some reaction bites. If you're out there, you see this big Vexus with the Northland wrap on it, this opener, holler at me. We can talk some fishing out there on the water.
Now we got one of my favorite dudes, Jared Houston. He's going to share some great advice, especially if you're on a multi-species mission this weekend.
The fishing opener. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to rock and roll another season on the water. Captain Jared Houston reporting from Duluth Superior with my tips and tricks on what I would recommend you do on opening morning. Jigs are hard to beat, and the new tungsten jigs are even harder to beat. Tip that with a minnow. I like to take my minnow and cut it in half so it's a fat head, just the head. Look for the biggest minnow in the bucket, and that helps you out. Look for shallow water. Early signs of any vegetative growth you can find is going to be good, but don't look past the old spawning grounds of river mouse and some shallow shoal rock, stuff like that. 10 feet, that's kind of my go-to depth, and in and around there. You're of course going to find some pike, some bass, some smallies will probably be on that hard bottom stuff. As far as panfish go, if you're looking for those, look for those any vegetation, soft substrate, mud bottoms, and use some, you know, panfish type lures. I like little flies or grub bugs, or, you know, little chunks of crawlers are gonna work. But back to the walleye thing, it's certainly hard to beat the candy, the eye candy. I love to eat this stuff just like walleyes. I mean, this stuff is amazing material. We've filmed on it and caught a bunch of fish, so everybody knows how that goes. And then stick baits. Never look away from stick baits either. So shallow water, early vegetation, those are your key areas you want to key in on. Have fun, be safe. We're going to see you on the water, rock and roll, tight lines.
Next up, Brad Hawthorne is going to break down how he's expecting the bite to be impacted by the weather and also this early spring that we've had this year on Mille Lacs Lake.
My number one tip for this opener is water temperature. I was out on Mille Lacs 3 weeks ago and the fish, walleyes, were already spawning. So that's gonna give us about 3.5 weeks in between opener and when the fish were spawning. Not to say that there's not a few stragglers still going on, there is, but we are further along in spawning and in temperature. So all you guys are like jig and minnow, I'm your guy. Trust me, we're in that same vein. Jig and minnow, opener, it's a tradition. That's what you need to do. Because of how far the fish are along this year, the weeds are already getting green, they're already popping too, is when you need to make sure you have your underspins, your plastics, all your stuff that you need when the water gets a little warmer, because you may find out on opening day, it's not just that jig and minnow, that those paddle tails and those grubs are gonna work a little bit better, and they may help you process fish faster too. So don't leave that box of plastics or that box of eye candy at home, because you just might need it, especially with the weeds already popping up and getting green. So check those weeds, and the other one is a little kindness. Make sure to help that guy out at the access that needs it, because there's a lot of guys that only get out fishing 2 or 3 times a year and may need a little help at the launch. So lend them a hand if they need it.
All right, now I'm gonna throw it over to my buddy TJ Erickson. He's gonna share some really good advice on where you should be looking for walleyes this upcoming weekend, and why he likes to think about the spawn and where that sets fish up early in the season like this.
So one of the first things that we're looking for related to locations is we need to find areas that are good and oxygenated. We need good dissolved oxygen in the water for these eggs to mature appropriately. So a lot of times we're talking, if you're in a river system, maybe some sort of current, especially when there's some of that riprap, being able to create those bubbles to get that oxygen dissolved in the water. Or if you're talking about a lot of our natural lakes that don't have much current, the number one thing we're gonna be looking for is wind. You're looking for wind-blown areas, especially shallow, that are gonna be able to have some more dissolved oxygen. And that's gonna be something that is going to really key in these walleyes on where they wanna spawn. And so when you're looking for the wind-blown areas, you're not necessarily looking for yesterday or today when we're talking spawning. You know, sometimes that can work for the day of, but specifically spawning grounds, they're not gonna go based off one day or another day. This is something that they've been doing often for years and years and years. So your prevailing winds are primarily gonna help identify some of these key areas that they might be spawning on some of this wind-blown structure. So we're one, looking for oxygenated water. The other thing that we're looking for is looking for the correct kind of substrate, which is essentially just the bottom composition. You're looking a lot of times for hard bottom, maybe some rocky bottom, maybe it's sand or rubble. And the reason that we're looking for that is a lot of times if there's an area that maybe has silt or a little more muddy that might get churned up, that's gonna deposit some sediment, deposit some silt on these eggs, and again, not gonna provide for great maturation of these eggs. Another thing specifically when we're talking rocks, rocks can help provide some protection from predation of maybe suckers or whatever that might be coming and eating some of these eggs. So we got oxygenated water, we got the right bottom composition. Now we're gonna talk a little bit about walleye movement and kind of what they're doing. You know, when we're talking walleyes, the males, if you've ever been out fishing and you're like, man, we're catching a lot of males, but we're not getting the big ones. You know, that's very common around opener, around the spawn, because the males, they will move in earlier and hang around later than some of those bigger females. That time frame where these females move in and spawn is much shorter than when these males maybe stick around and fertilize some of these eggs. So they go in and they go out relatively quickly. So there might be times where you can get on both. You can get some smaller males, some bigger females. That is awesome. Those days are great. That's what everybody hopes for. But just keep in mind, if you're catching a lot of those smaller ones, again, what a lot of people are looking for this time of year is a good meal of eater-sized walleyes, so that's awesome. But if you're looking for those bigger fish, you might have to think a little bit differently. And so these big females are moving out much quicker for a couple reasons. One is they want to reduce their body temperature. They want to get out to some of that cooler water, so that way they can kind of recoup from the spawn. But another thing is a lot of times, especially in some of our bigger natural clear lakes, anywhere that has ciscos, they like to go out to those areas because, as you know, ciscos smelt some of that forage. It has so much nutrients. When they're looking to recoup from the spawn, that is gonna be the primary food source that they're looking for, especially those bigger walleyes. They can eat some of that bigger forage. And so you might even see some of these bigger females on that first break a little bit deeper, or suspended over open water, or even out to some of that mid-lake structure. We've caught some fish early in the year on mid-lake structure. So specifically, if you're looking for bigger walleyes, that's something that I wouldn't overlook.
Next up, Joel Nelson is gonna share a couple presentations that will help you put more walleyes in the boat on Minnesota Walleye Opener.
Hey everybody, Joel Nelson here with Northland Tackle, and I want to tell you about 2 different ways to use tungsten for the walleye opener. And I tell you what, tungsten, it's a revolutionary material. If you haven't used it, here's a couple reasons why you really should have it in your tackle box. First and foremost, it's absolutely wonderful for being able to feel. You can feel everything that's going on down there, especially with hardline, but even fluorocarbon, you can mentally map the bottom with your jig, which is a real advantage. Helps you feel cover, certain bottom composition changes, it's great for that. Number 2, I really like tungsten because it's heavy for its size. You're able to be able to downsize your bait, yet still have all that weight that you need to be able to feel, especially in a windy situation. But if you have to downsize because of cold weather or because of clear water, you're not losing out on all that feel and the weight that you need to maintain good bottom contact. So 2 great reasons to be able to use it. But here's your techniques. First, it's just a standard jig and minnow. So if you're using this Northland long shank tungsten jig, you'll be able to actually feed this through the minnow's gill plate and then back up through its belly and up out of its back. Or you can use a short shank and rig it just through the top of its head. But this jig, whether you're drifting, dragging, you're under a controlled drift with a trolling motor, it's a great way to be able to find fish. If you found them, maybe in developing clumps of weeds, you can pitch up to them. And this jig, rod and reel combination, absolutely wonderful for it. But let's give you the second technique, because I know so many of you love to be able to run slip bobbers on the opener. And if you're running a slip bobber, I'm here to tell you that a small, short shank tungsten jig is my #1 terminal end to any slip bobber rig. And the reason is simple. It's a great hook, it's a great design, but it's compact yet heavy. I need the weight to be able to pull the line through that slip bobber, especially if it's curly, and still be able to prop that slip bobber up. So there you have it. Those are the 2 ways. A long shank or short shank tungsten jig with a jig and minnow combination, or at the terminal end of your slip bobber setup. So go ahead and give those a try. That's 2 ways for tungsten during the walleye opener.
All right, now we're gonna hand it off to Brian Brosdahl, and he's gonna share exactly what he's gonna have tied up this weekend for Minnesota Walleye Opener.
Opener day is upon us, and here are my picks for opener day. I'm gonna use short shank tungsten jig heads from Northland Fishing Tackle to live nose hook a shiner. Deep V with that little spinner on there. It's got a nice willow leaf spinner. I love the pink. And then of course eye candy. I love it in the minnow. They're really soft baits. That's gonna be fantastic. And the minnow is just perfect. Moonlight on moonlight. And then here is a paddle tail. That's smoked shad. That's gonna be good. Then up here, here's a deep V with a flashaboo tail. That flash tail deep V is gonna be nice for a small minnow, chunk of worm, or even a little leech to pitch it out and jig it. As you see on the other rod setups here, I have a long shank tungsten jig head for double hooking minnows. That's gonna work fantastic. And then right over here, that's gonna be a hot one. That's smoked shad, and that is a minnow. They're really soft and subtle. And then of course, pink and silver. It's been hot for panfish, it's gonna be hot for walleyes. And of course, when I'm out on the water, I always like to have a couple different things to try. And you know, you could stick with a jig and minnow, but I like to try everything. And a short shank jig on a bobber. If I see fish that won't bite, I'll just soak bait in front of them. And then I'll also have a drop shot. Drop shot with a bead and ready to deploy if need. So if it's really windy, I could pitch it out and just jig it past the fish. So opener day can be a lot of fun. Don't forget to bring the Northland tackle. Tungsten with eye candy plastics are going to be a great thing. Hopefully you have great success on the opener. Maybe we'll see you out there. Good luck fishing. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's about all we got for you in this video. Special thanks to everybody for sharing all that info. There's definitely a lot to take in there, but I think you guys will get some good tips that'll help you catch a few more fish this upcoming weekend and also the weeks ahead, because this spring pattern tends to stick around for a little bit. In spring, things change really quickly, but take this information that you got from this video and use it to catch more fish in the coming weeks. So if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to press that little red subscribe button down below, because we have a lot more awesome content coming in the future. And until then, we will see you in the next one. Good luck this opener.